Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Depending on what time of the day you are watching this, I am Joaquin Andres T. Rodriguez, and these are my takeaways for GELITPH. For Module 1, we tackled upon tradition and subversion. So, traditions are basically stories which have been passed down within a culture through different forms. So, these are folk tales, legends, myths, mga alamat. Subversion, on the other hand, is when we my first definition of subversion in my head before I search the actual definition is that when we say it subverted our expectations, it basically means that it didn't meet our expectations, but I was still enjoying it. Like, just because our expectations aren't met doesn't mean that the material is not good. Like, it surprised us basically. But the actual meaning per Google is that it attempts to undermine the dominant values and traditions of a society, which is basically subversion. Like, it surprised us because our expectations weren't met, and it gave us like a new perspective. So, my first takeaway is that tradition is passed down through stories, and folk tales is part of Philippine culture. The material that I'm going to talk about is the sun and the moon. Once the sun and the moon quarreled with each other, and the sun said, "You are only the moon, and are not much good. If I did not give you light, you would be no good at all." But the moon answered, "You are only the sun, and you are very hot. The women like me better, for when I shine at night, they go outdoors and spin." These words of the moon made the sun so angry that he threw sand in her face, and you can still see the dark spots on the face of the moon. Mga alamat. So, it basically gives us this not real, but it's a very fun explanation as to why things are. So, why does the moon have craters is because the sun threw sand in their face. Takeaway number 2 is that the characters from folktales are present but changed. And the material that I'm going to talk about here is Ella Arcangel. So, how did this subverted my expectations or our expectations? Well, when we think of an aswang, we think of it as like a bad thing, right? Basically, they eat people. But in the story, that's not what El Arcangel, the protagonist, does. Because she is an aswang, but she is the protagonist. She protects other people instead of eating them. And apart from the aswang being subverted here from being a bad thing to a good thing, there's also the Tianak. And the Tianak is still like represented as this evil entity, but we can see here how its origins were changed throughout time, because back then Tianak's origins were is the spirit of a child whose mother died before giving birth. But because of colonization, the definition that is now used in El Arcangel is that the Tianak is the spirit of an unborn child. There's still both spirits, and there's both spirits of a child, but you know, the context is different, because in the first one the mother died, but in the second one the mother did not die, but the soul of the baby is alive even though the baby wasn't born. Takeaway number 3, Anita defend a land enraged. It's a video game, and basically what I got from it is that our age right now, there's technology, and as such, because of technology, we have a new medium to tell stories. So it's animation, it's comic books, it's video games. My takeaway for Module 2. So, Module 2 is about the nation and beyond. And the materials in here are all about the Philippines because that is our nation. GELITPH nga, the literature of the Philippines. And most of this literature is basically about how we're not living, we're not doing good. Because, the Philippines is a developing country and whatnot. And my first takeaway is the danger of the single story is that there are multiple perspectives. And as such, it means that both things can be true at the same time. The single story doesn't talk about other people. It basically talks about how we perceive ourselves in our own lives. Because if we tell ourselves that we're this thing, we're gonna continue believing it and we're gonna continue doing things that basically integrate that into our lives and into our existence. Yeah, what we need to do is that we need to be aware that we're telling ourselves these stories. For example, I say that I'm dumb. And if I continue saying myself that I am gonna do things that would make that into reality. That's why there's like affirmations, right? We need to be positive to ourselves. We're humans. We contain multitudes. Sometimes we contradict ourselves and that's fine. Takeaway number 2, I watch because I'm a big film buff, and even if it was one of the optional materials, it kind of gave me a reason to watch it. And so I watched it, and what I learned from it is that most people don't really care until someone they know is experiencing it. And I'm talking about corruption. Because in that film, the dad didn't really care of the martial law. They see it when they're going home and riding their car, but they are apart from it. I mean, they were distant from it. And in the end, it basically involved them now because one of the characters there died. Basically, is a wake up call, which leads me to my third takeaway is that we should question the powers that be. My material for this is Kangkungan by Mike De Leon. And what I learned from that short film about Duterte and how he wasn't really a good leader, just a very big criticism, right? Is that we should question the powers that be. The third module talks about the body and the desire. And this was like one of the most fun modules. The third module was fun because it's about love, the body and the desire, you know. My first takeaway is from Zita is that love teaches us. Yes, all of this is gonna be about love. Love teaches us. What does this mean? It means that from our experiences in love, whether it be romantic, familial, platonic, we learn something from it. It teaches us. In the specific context of that story, where Zita fell in love with her teacher, it basically taught her that some people aren't permanent. I mean, they teach each other. I think sometimes things are better left unsaid. my second takeaway is from Sirena by Glock 9, that love is beautiful even if it's not perceived as the norm. And, this is basically about queer culture, being LGBTQ, and, as a queer person, it is a pretty good song. This is basically how we still exist to this day. It's because we keep existing. We keep being beautiful. We keep presenting ourselves in the way we want to, even though there are so many people against it. My last takeaway is from Game Boys, the series, is that love helps us. So, in the show, there was like supposed to be, well, not supposed to be, but you know how most shows there's a love triangle, and there was this two boys who fell in love with each other through a video game, and one boy there has this girl best friend, and in the first watching, I think in the first episodes, our minds are kind of like, oh no, there's gonna be a love triangle between these two boys and this girl best friend. But no, that wasn't what happened, because the girl best friend actually helped her boy best friend reach out to this boy that he's in love with. And that's basically what love is, like, love helps us, even though they have some past history because he is bisexual. There is still that love present, and it helps them. Like, love can transform. Even if you fall in love with someone romantically, I do believe that you can still be friends with them afterwards. Taking a ride 405 through the west side. My takeaways outside the modules are, number one is stories have their narrators. What does this mean? It means that not sometimes, but like in all stories, there are perspectives in which we see the story through. And as such, it doesn't necessarily mean that what is being said is the right thing. Takeaway number two is that though having similar structures, stories are different. Some stories are similar to each other in that they both climax a certain way, they both begin a certain way, and they both end, well, not the same way, but they have similarities to them. For example, Black Swan and Whiplash, they're both artists wanting to be perfect. And while the drummer from Whiplash got his perfect ending, I mean, they both got their perfect endings, right? But the other one died. The other one didn't. Or maybe they both died, or maybe they both didn't. It was left pretty vaguely. And so we don't really know what happened. Even though stories have similar structures, they are so different. And my third takeaway from outside modules is that live media is alive and well. I just watched Dulasal, and that was my first theater experience since elementary. And that was a pretty good experience. That was a pretty good time. A pretty good 3 hours spent in my life. Yeah. Pretty good show. I love the second story. The story about the Conan Hall elevator person who died there because they were stuck there for 3 days. That was pretty horrifying. How do you see your learning and insights from GELITPH, contributing to your development as an individual and member of society, even after academic life in DLSU. What GELITPH contributed to my development as an individual and member of society is that I became more appreciative of Filipino media, and it has made me more critical of media that I consume in general. And number one is that Filipino films are hard to find. They are hard to find. Like, unlike most films where you can just torrent it, you can't just do that with most Filipino films. And that's what kind of sucks about it, because there are so much Filipino media that I want to watch, but I don't know where to watch it, because sometimes there's like movie screenings online and you're gonna have to pay a ticket for it, which I don't mind, but it only comes for a limited time, and after that limited time you're gonna have to wait for another screening, which, it just kind of pops up into your news feed until you know, and then you know it. And my takeaway number two is that there's a bunch of good Filipino media out there. Like, one song that I keep playing after being presented to the class was Ferris Wheel by Young Constantino. That's a very good song. I'm glad that I listened to that and now know it. Like, there's a bunch of good Filipino media out there. There's still so many left, like, to be discovered. I just recently watched Yesterday Will Always Be Yesterday. It's short film by JT Trinidad, and it was basically presented in UP Film Fest. And it's such a good film, and I only heard about it through TikTok, and I am imploring you to watch it, even though the way I watched is that I basically chatted the director of the movie for a link, and I'm glad that they gave me a link. It's a G Drive link. But yeah, it's pretty good. And there's so many good Filipino media out there that is left to be found, and to find that you have to interact to people instead of like finding it yourself. In conclusion, I'm glad that I finished this course, or will finish it. As a film buff, it has led me to watch these many different Filipino films and media, like El Arcangel. I read the comics as well, pretty nice. My closing statement for this vlog is that be critical, be aware, and enjoy. Thank you for listening.